Hi, let's dive into the second short lecture. Today I'm going to talk about speech anxiety and language. This is also a shameless plug and a reminder to complete your speech anxiety online discussion. Imagine we were in a classroom and I started to hand out impromptu speech topics. You are selected to go first, and you have to give a speech on American President Zachary Taylor, someone you know nothing about. How do you feel? Butterflies in your stomach, shaky, sweaty, maybe you stumble over your words a bit. Those are all physical symptoms of speech anxiety. It's completely normal and everyone has it. I have it terribly before recording these, especially since I don't get any immediate feedback from my audience. But you're in a skills training class, which is the number one way to combat speech anxiety. And today we're going to discuss a couple of more ways to address your anxiety. It's important to know that in this class, you will be speaking extemporaneously. This means you will prepare a speech carefully in advance. Other options would be through a manuscript or impromptu delivery. Impromptu would, for obvious reasons, be difficult in an online setting. However, you could show up to the presentation without any preparation. I can tell you from watching students do this, it does not go over well. Just because you can talk about tacos for 5 to 7 minutes doesn't mean you can do it in an interesting or organized fashion. Preparing and relying on a full script also has its issues. If you are unprepared for a stumble or you go off script, it may lead you to derail your speech. Speaking extemporaneously brings those two ideas together. You'll be well practiced and researched and speaking with a small outline, but you won't be winging it or reading directly from a sheet of paper. Hopefully, all of this prep will help to alleviate anxiety symptoms. Some other tools for addressing speech anxiety are cognitive remodification, which would be replacing your negative thoughts with positive thoughts, which may sound kind of silly, but if you think about it, and I know this happens to me when I get really down on myself about something, or just, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do it. And so instead, if you just, take a moment, take a breath, and realize that you're going to get through this, it really does just completely change your attitude and can change the outcome of a speech. There's also visualization, which would be rehearsing your by using your imagination to envision your speech from start to finish. Again, this is something, it sounds really, I don't know, almost childish when you're reading it in a book, but I actually constantly am doing visualization. If I like to go running and I like to cycle, and a lot of times when I'm running or when I'm cycling, I will literally envision my day. I'll think about the things that I'm going to be doing, the things I want to accomplish, and I'll think, I might think about a meeting I have and the things that I need to make sure I talk about or bring up in the meeting. And again, it is very helpful at getting me through my day. It would be very helpful to get you through your speech, and a way to practice in your head, because you're not always going to have somebody to practice to. And then another big word for ways to combat communication apprehension would be habituation, which is just practice. Taking this class is an example of this. Again, skills training is really the best and most effective way to combat any anxiety you may have. And then another tip I always like to give my students to just make themselves feel better on presentation days is I always ask that they dress up a little bit. I have noticed that when I physically look confident, I do feel better and I feel like I'm more in command. And, confidence does just go a long way in getting you through those 5 to 7 minutes. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to go over the language chapter. There are a few takeaways that I wanted you all to have. Powerful and concise language can make or break a speech. We'll have an online discussion shortly on our favorite speakers. Really listen to their language and how they weave a narrative. The first thing that I want to talk about is denotative versus connotative. Denotative is the actual meaning of a word, and connotative is the associated meaning of a word. And so when you're putting together your speech materials, you just want to be very aware that these types of different meanings exist for different types of words and how, again, you're using your language. So my adorable example is that a dog is, and this is certainly not the Webster's dictionary definition, is a dog is a four-legged creature. We could probably add furry in there, or, maybe a pet. But there are some connotative meanings for dog. Depending on what decade you live in, it could mean a good friend. Also, I think a more common way I've seen this word used connotatively is when we were talking about a guy who's maybe treated somebody they dated poorly. I'm sure if we were all together in a classroom, we could come up with 20 other connotative meanings for the word dog. Your use of language is going to make or break, or could make or break, your speech. So I also wanted you to understand and think about things as you're moving forward on your first introduction speech. So the first tip that the book gives is to be concise and concrete. I know as a speaker, the moment I go off on a tangent and I lose that conciseness, I tend to stumble or use filler words like or like. So don't feel like you need to over explain something. Also use familiar words. Use things that make you feel comfortable and make you feel confident. Don't feel like you need to use your 5 to 7 minutes to tell us how smart you are, because we already know you're smart because you got into college. Use repetition. Again, it just is a way to make you feel confident. It's a way to make you feel comfortable. It's a way to connect your audience with what you're trying to get across to them. Use literary devices. I'm sure you've taken an English class before, so, summon those English gods and think about ways that you can incorporate metaphors and similes and alliteration into your speech, because it pulls your audience's attention. They're going to focus back on you. It's a way to draw them in and keep them interested when you're talking about something. And then things you want to do are avoid inclusive language. So a problem that I have would be I tend to say the word guys a lot. So I will say, hi guys, but really that's a pretty exclusive way to address other humans. And so a more inclusive thing that I have personally been trying to work on is saying like, hi folks, or hi all, so that I'm not just talking to guys or calling people guys. I'm including everybody in the room who may be a him, a her, or a there. Also, you want to avoid non-parallel language. So, instead of saying fireman or waitress, you use words like firefighter or server, or, you don't need to point out somebody's gender if it's not important to the story. So instead of letting us all know that that pilot is a female pilot, you can just say that that person, Amelia Earhart, is a pilot because she's a pilot. You also want to avoid jargon. Again, you're going to be in a room of people that is very diverse and they come from lots of different backgrounds and they might not understand your jargon even if it's commonplace to you. So just think about times that people have been speaking way above your head and make sure you're not doing that when you're putting together your speech materials. And that goes back to using things that are concise and concrete. And then you also want to make sure that you avoid racist, sexist, and ageist language. Not only is it just completely inappropriate and there's no reason that it needs to be in there, but you're also going to alienate your audience. And that is not something you want to do when you're giving a speech, because the moment you do that, you lose control of the speech. I want to end this lecture with a very simple piece of advice, which is to be powerful. Use your language and practice to present a speech you can be proud of. So this is all I have in lecture 2 for week 1. Remember, you have online discussions, you have an assignment due, and you have an introduction speech coming up. Thanks for tuning in.